I'm excited to be here supporting Cindy in her pursuits as leading the charge for teacher retention. I'm completely passionate about this work, and we have a lot in common in the goals that we're trying to accomplish. So again, thank you, Cindy, for inviting me to be, a host in one of your leadership series.
You are
And so,
welcome. I'm thrilled you're here. Thanks for doing it.
hey, you're welcome. A little bit about me. I've been doing the work for since 2019. I've been a Dare to Lead certified facilitator. I was trained back in March of 2019. Yes, that was a year before the pandemic, by Brene in a cohort group of about 150 folks. And it was an amazing experience. I'm very humbled to be here and presenting some of her research. This is an empirically researched program. It's not just pulled out of common threads of people's experiences. It is truly an empirically researched program. And so I'm very thrilled to be presenting one core component of the rumbling with vulnerability part of the Dare to Lead work. And so I'm going to lean in. I always love to choose courage over comfort if I can, to choose doing what is right over what is fast, fun, or easy. So I encourage you to do that as well. This is a picture of my mother, who at the age of 81 she's still here. She's 86 now, but she was rafting the Grand Canyon at the age of 81 and choosing definitely courage over comfort. So I take inspiration from her. And a little bit about my why. I love Simon Sinek's work, and he encourages us to find out the why behind what we do and why we lead the way we do. And so for me, I am a firm believer in supporting you to find your way. I am that guide alongside that you can hopefully rely on to help you discover where you want to go. And if like that Google search engine, only I'm the person who's going to listen and try to help you figure out where you want to go with your goals and plans and just life in general. So these are some things about me. I love animals. I'm a consummate learner. I'm going to learn from you as well today, hopefully, because the more you share with me, the more this is a reciprocal exchange of learning. I also love adventure, and I believe in our capacities to be the daring leaders that we would like to become. I am a cognitive coaching trainer as well. I had the adaptive schools work. So I don't know if you're familiar with that work out of the Thinking Collaborative. So I combine the research of cognitive coaching and adaptive schools with Dare to Lead and really use a coaching program that integrates these core pieces together. So hopefully here's some of that today as I present how shame shows up at work. And we're going to dig into a key component of Dare to Lead, which is, again, leaning in with vulnerability. These are all of the books that she's written. Her most recent one is Atlas of the Heart, and it truly is an atlas. So it's not actually meant to be read from front to back. It's to be opened up if you're feeling a certain way about something. She's identified 87 emotions that daring leaders can be more literate on. And so if you're feeling overwhelmed, you just open up the chapter on overwhelmed and find some resources there and some other ways of connecting. And so the first thing I want to talk about, especially because we're all school minded, we're in the education field, want to talk about professional learning communities and creating accountable spaces. And this is one of the pieces that can really help you do that. So the first thing we're going to do to make this a professional learning community with very short time that we have, and that is to take a look at one of my favorite norming tools, and it is called the Rumble Commitment. So this is something that you can use as well to set up norms and intentions in your meetings to really help fine-tune and focus people and let go of things that might be those external influences and really focus on what you need to do during that PLC time. So I'm going to ask all of us today to lean into this. Choose one that you'd like to focus in on yourself today, and then share that with the group so we can be fully engaged. And so for me, I'm going to choose staying in the messy middle, because there could be some topics that come up about how shame shows up at work that could be a little contentious. So I just want to stay in that with you and wrestle with it and just maybe come out with some new ideas on how to resolve it. So that would be the one I would be choosing.
I will be prepared to offer my point of view.
Okay.
If appropriate.
Thank you, Cindy.
I was going to say the second one, stay aware of emotions and how they affect me.
Okay. Thank you, Gretchen.
This is Wendy, and I was going to do listen with the same passion, which I want to be heard.
I love that one. That one comes from Harriet Lerner's work that Brene quotes in the book. And I love that one. Thank you.
I'm gonna say stay aware of emotions and how they affect others.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you all for that. And I will be sharing the slide deck with you if you want after the webinar so that you can have access to these as well and put them there if you want to use any of these tools that we're looking at, like the Rumble commitment. And it looks like we have someone else who'd like to join us, Cindy. I think it's Abby. Do you want to let her in there?
Yep, I got her in.
Okay. And so before we go on, let's go ahead and let her join the group and we'll do a quick introduction. How does that sound?
Sure.
Okay. I don't see her quite yet, though.
I think she has her everything off, but hi,
Okay, well,
Abby.
while we're waiting for this, then Marcy, Wendy, Gretchen, do you see any ways that you might feel like you could use this in the work that you're doing, a Rumble commitment piece?
I know that we're doing a lot of work with our school improvement team right now, and one of our next steps is going to be developing some norms of that team. And so I thought I would already maybe be able to use this for that.
Oh, that's fantastic, Marcy. I'm super glad you might find it helpful.
Yep, and I agree. Every year in the fall, we review our meeting norms to be applied across all meetings in our program. So this would be definitely a resource we can use to review and refine our meeting norms.
Thank you, Wendy.
The school where I'm currently teaching, we have year-round school. It's the Job Corps Center.
Oh,
So every 2 weeks, we have a new group of students come in. And so you constantly have a new set of students, and we have a group A and a group B student. So every other week I have a different group of students. But then like maybe their trade instructor for painting is going on a trip. And so then I have students 2 weeks in a row. So you really, as a teacher, you have to become very creative about everything. And so since it's a continuous overturn of new students and students who've been there a while, this would be helpful for them to realize that they need to be aware of these things.
absolutely, Gretchen. I love that you're thinking about the ways you can incorporate it into the classroom and really teach these skills to kids as well, because that's what we need for full engagement, right?
Yep.
And it can really set those attentions. And what I like about it too is it's more specific than maybe the cognitive coaching and adaptive schools norms of collaboration. It gets a little bit more granular, and that's what I really like about this. So thank
Yeah,
you.
and I appreciate it that it could be any age appropriate. I mean, we have 16, and then students can come in here at 24 and stay until they're 26. So I'm working with a lot of young adults also. And so that's very helpful.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yay. Okay, are there any questions then about the Rumble commitment moving forward? All right. Then let's go ahead and look at the next one. In the Dare to Read, Dare to Lead curriculum, there are 4 skill sets of courage. The first one that we're going to look at today is a piece, just a small piece of the rumbling with vulnerability component. It is not, the book is not broken up into 4 equal parts. 2/3 of the book is about rumbling with vulnerability. Then the next third breaks it down into living into our values, braving trust, and learning to rise. They're all great components. So we're just pulling one piece out of rumbling with vulnerability, and that is the research behind how shame shows up at work. And so what I'm going to invite you to do is really think when I'm learning this and when I'm thinking about it, do a dual code. Think not only what am I learning, but then what could I apply, observe, measure, teach, or learn? And so I kind of give it that OMT abbreviation, which I like. So what am I observing, measuring, and I like to say learning or going to go teach about. And so the one piece that's really critical in this is vulnerability. And so the definition of vulnerability is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. And so when you think about times when you have been uncertain and you're feeling a bit of that fear about doing something brave with your life and leaning in with courage, are you willing to take that risk, be emotionally exposed, and be truly vulnerable? And so given this definition, what questions might you have about this notion of vulnerability? Okay. This is me using my teacher wait time. So it's been ingrained. I can give you an example. Next week, I'll be doing a 1-day workshops with some folks that I've not met before. They're going to be in rural hospitals across Wyoming. And do I feel uncertain, at risk, and emotionally exposed? Yes, because I haven't met them, right? It's like that first day of school. You're going to come in with a new class. So it's going to feel vulnerable, but I'm so passionate about the work and that it's worth that risk. And I want to choose to be a daring presenter or facilitator and lean in with vulnerability. So hopefully that gives you a good example. One of the major key components of this training is self-awareness. So the more self-aware we are, the more we're going to be able to observe and measure what's happening around us, analyze it, work through it, resolve it, especially when things become crunchy or messy. When you really need to have a hard conversation with folks, I in the past would prefer to avoid them. I'm now leaning in and saying, no, you can't just avoid it. You need to lean in and have that hard conversation and do it with respect and kindness. One of the phrases that you'll hear Brene use a lot is clear as kind. So the clearer I can be with kindness, lean in with that and have that conversation, the less it's going to be resolved and we can move forward in a more productive manner. But let me tell you, doing this with family, really hard, because there's so much emotional baggage that we have sometimes when we work with families, but it works. If I can do it with my mother, you guys can do it too. And so one thing that I want us to think about in the research, the number one shame trigger at work is fear of irrelevance. I feel like I'm not valued, I'm not supported, I'm not seen, and my worth is no longer matters here. You will also see this happen in the classroom. When you see shame show up in a classroom, most of the time it's kids feeling irrelevant, that they are not worthy, that they can't learn, they tell terrible stories to themselves, that they're stupid. And so when those messages get so inundated in ourselves and we believe the messages that our brain is telling us, we begin to feel these ultimate feelings of shame and this fear of irrelevance. So one of the things that we're going to try to do is lean in and think, what can I do to be more aware of, to mitigate this notion of how shame is showing up at work? So are there any questions that you have about this one phrase? Have you seen it?
The only thing I was thinking is how this might tie to teacher retention. And I feel like that is a bit of what we're seeing with educators, administrators, people who are choosing to leave the profession now in larger numbers than we've seen in the past. There's lots of contributions that are influences that have perhaps taken that level of irrelevance to higher levels than that's been in the past, perhaps with, maybe not feeling like they have a lot of autonomy in decision making, whether it's with students or curriculum or whatever. Have you, in your work with school leaders, I know you were just in Las Vegas last week, do you think that level of school leadership that you were talking to, do you feel like they understood that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
When you think about, you mentioned parent influence as well. It's now so parents, we want parent involvement. We want it in a healthy way though, as well. And so if parents are constantly questioning what you're teaching, how you're teaching it, why you're teaching it that way, that can really create that sense of irrelevance. Like, okay, so what I'm teaching now is not relevant and it's more. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not sure if I'm saying that clearly.
Yeah, I think it diminishes you as a professional if the parent continues to question. I mean, it's okay to have questions,
Absolutely.
but it's different when we see a level of questioning that can be extremely disrespectful and not just an innocent question that people are, working as a partner, but questioning your decision making as a professional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And does anyone else have some ideas here?
This is Gretchen. So I was just going to say, I think, how do I say this? I've only worked at 2 different schools in my whole career. And so the former school I worked at, I had worked there so long and it's a very small school. So it was very much a family setting. And yet we had teachers who had been there a long time, but then we also had people who had just graduated from college and they came and they basically donated a year or 2 or 3 of their time at the school setting. So we were often trying to get those groups of students, those groups of young teachers to come back for a second year or a third year because you could see a marked difference in their improvement, knowing the community, knowing the students, just, how it is between a second year teacher and a first year teacher. There's a huge jump. And so I don't know, the word vulnerability scares me. And as a teacher, it scares me because I've always had a group of students where there's at least one or two, sometimes 5 out of 20, sometimes 10 out of 20 students that, by God, I'm not going to show any vulnerability to them. It is a dog eat dog world, and I have to put down that I am the top dog right away in the classroom setting. So possibly in a different school setting, but that word to me, unless I have a different definition of it, it I don't feel comfortable being vulnerable as a teacher. Human, showing empathy, like if I have a death of a close person, I'll come into the group of students and I often cry when I tell them the news. But I have to be at work, a couple of days before the funeral. I sometimes can take off the day of the funeral, but I'll
Mhm.
share with them. But I don't know. I wouldn't describe that as vulnerable. Maybe it is.
Because you're showing up in regards to a very traumatic event, you're showing that you care and that they're not alone, which is empathy, which also then douses shame, which is a key component of taking vulnerability to a place where we armor up. And so, Gretchen, what you're describing is the armor that we use to armor up and protect ourselves. And there's 3 types of those. It's moving away, moving towards, and moving against. I think what you're describing with the students is they're armoring up to move against and protect. And so if we can remove that armor, but also stand with confidence that, yes, we all feel vulnerable. If we don't feel vulnerable, if we don't feel uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure, and we keep that armor up, it just divides us. And so the more we can lean in and connect with people, the more we're going to find out, oh, you have those same fears, those same feelings of uncertainty and risk. Oh, I'm not alone in this anymore. Because courage is contagious, but so is anxiety. And so
Right.
if everyone around us is feeling anxious, most of us are going to armor up and defend ourselves in some way.
Right. A winning team leads to
Mhm.
more winning, whereas a team that sees themselves as a group of losers, then you just spiral downward. Right.
Exactly, exactly. And so
Right.
what
And
Renee,
and what students say when they talk to themselves. I mean, I don't have that copy of that book anymore, but there's a very old book, probably written in the 90s or 80s, that what you say when you talk to yourself is really important. And I give that speech weekly in one form or another. But yeah, I I don't know. And new teachers and teacher retention, like I wouldn't want to be a new teacher right now in today's society.
yeah,
I
it's
just
gonna,
feel nobody supports teachers.
and if we think without maybe some absolutes, many do support teachers, and there's a lot in the media that shows not. But I think if you really uncover things, and Marcy, maybe you can speak more of this as an administrator too, just know, are you seeing maybe more support out there or not? Like internally, are you circling the wagons a bit more?
I would say that it's in my career, which has been over 20 years, I feel like it's less now than it ever has been,
Okay.
even from an administrator perspective.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hopefully we're going to find some resources and some ways of being self-aware and monitoring not only in ourselves but others, like how shame shows up, what we can maybe do to mitigate it, and how to move through it. Because Gretchen, one of the things that Brene says, she's got this great phrase, do we speak to ourselves as we would speak to someone we love? And so if the messages that we're telling ourselves are, I'm stupid, I'm an idiot, I'm not worthy, would we ever say that? Would I ever say that to my son, to my mother? Then why am I
Right.
saying it to myself?
Right. Or if you overhear a student saying that about themselves to themselves, I mean their own negative self-talk.
Yeah, and it's powerful. Our brains are very powerful, and they're hardwired for connection. So the more we can bring those connections together, the better we're going to be and the healthier we're going to be and ready to learn and work together in productive ways. So let's move forward here then. We're going to look at the list first and do some predictions, activate your background knowledge about how you think these are the top categories of how shame shows up at work from her research. I'm going to ask you to read through the list, make some connections, and then generate any questions that you have. And let's talk about this list a little bit and what you think about it.
Can you tell me more about how shame shows up at work with favoritism? Is that from a leader perspective, having favoritism? Is it because there's less vulnerability in connecting with the people that you know? Is that what that's meaning? Or can you describe more about that?
Yeah. Who might like to add to that? It's always fun to hear from you first before I answer the question. Okay, I'll just go with it. So favoritism is the in-group, out-group, can be that the group that's, more popular. There can be some favoritism within that, within that dynamic that people maybe gravitate towards. Favoritism also in the workplace can be, you may be highlighting one group or one teacher over another, and it can be perceived as a level of disparity and comparison. Favoritism and comparison can go hand in hand. And so now if you have a favorite student in the class and the other students may not feel as, as connected with you in some way. And so they check out and they feel a little bit less relevant.
So I understand now. So it's on the receiving end of the person noticing favoritism. Okay.
The opposite of favoritism would be inclusion. Is everyone included and are all voices heard, both in the classroom and the PLC team? And are we using protocols that help facilitate that to happen?
I would say most of us can, at least for me, I think the self-worth tied to productivity is a huge issue that many professionals, I think, could relate to. And I've had some experiences with that personally about how that's not such a good thing to get stuck on. Sometimes things happen that make you pretty much less productive, and that can impact then your self-worth, your feelings of self-worth. And I think I didn't really understand that so much until more recently. So I do think that's an important one.
I would also tie that to Cindy, perfectionism. I have a team of teachers who are high performers, high flyers, and I am a perfectionist, high performer, high flyer. I have high expectations. So we all push each other. And it can really, it's great because we're all dedicated, but it definitely leads to not just shame, but also burnout, and just kind of working on that culture of your self-worth. It isn't what you do or how much you get done. It's who you are and your passion and what you give to students and who you are as a human being. I'm really trying to work on that self-talk with myself, but also then being able to exude that to my teachers to then be able to have my students feel the same way. Like, not every conversation is about what you need to do or what your grade is or what you need to get caught up on in regards to work. So it's just a big cycle that starts, I believe, from the top. And so that's something that I'm trying to work on.
Thank you, Wendy. That is a perfect example. And the about self-worth tied to productivity. And if we can, the opposite of that is having healthy boundaries. So what are the healthy boundaries that you need to have in place that allow you to model that as well? And we can talk more about that after, but are we answering emails at 10 o'clock at night? Knowing, it's going to help in the moment, but what is that modeling? So, but it is a culturally embedded item in Western culture. We do this. The more we work, the more we seem to be given accolades and seen as worthy.
Right. And even just simple as, yes, I might be answering the email at 10 p.m., but I'm going to schedule it to hit their inbox at 8 a.m. So that helps a little bit.
Oh, no, Wendy, that helps a lot. That's a great strategy because it lets you go to sleep too. Okay. Well, are we ready to hear from Brene?
You bet.
All right. Well, this is about a 9-minute video. And so we're going to listen to what Brene has to say about her research on how shame shows up.
When we talk about how shame shows up in
free to share. What were some things that you heard that seemed important? So record and reflect. And so whenever you're ready, feel free to share something that you heard that seemed important.
One of the things that when I was listening to it that I thought of was, as an administrator in a school, oftentimes I will hear about things like through the back channeling or through the grapevine of, oh, somebody said this after the meeting, or, that kind of thing. And I guess I'm wanting to figure out ways that I can build that efficacy of my teachers to be able to say, why don't you bring that up in the meeting? Because we can't do anything about it if you're not going to talk about it in front of everybody. And so trying to build that up to give teachers the knowledge of it, and B, the strength and want to do it when it happens, instead of coming and tattling to me later when there's not a lot I can do about it then. So that's something that I've been kind of messing around with for a while.
Marcy, that's a great example. Do folks even know how to start that conversation and to lean in and say it? And what do they need to help themselves make that happen? Is
And I
we've
don't
got to
think they do. I don't think they do. I think they are worried that they're gonna upset somebody, or they're going to come off as either a know-it-all or I don't know, they're gonna come off in a way they don't want to. And I don't think it's skills that they have naturally. And sometimes it's just like, I'd rather just not hurt anybody's feelings, so I'm not gonna say anything at all, which that ends up causing more issues than if you would just say something. So I'm just trying to really work on building that capacity within my staff and finding ways to be able to do that. And I'm always open to hearing more.
Okay. One of the things that I'll be sure and send you as a resource are the Rumble starters. And that's just meaning, how do we start that conversation? How do we lean in with that? And so you can use that as a tool. I think about back when we were teaching literacy in the classroom. How do students, it's reading, writing, speaking, and listening, listen to each other, and how do they speak to each other? We have to actually teach that. So
Yeah.
are there sentence stems that I can use? Like, tell me more about that, or what's your passion behind that, or walk me through that, whatever that is. But sometimes we get so stuck in that emotion of, I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm not going to, okay, this is the way that I can start that sentence that I want to be able to say.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Teacher perspective, in order to be able to speak out like that in a meeting requires a teacher to be vulnerable. So we want to, what's preventing them? What are the barriers for being vulnerable in that setting?
That's great, Abby. And how can I build trust and connection that's a little bit stronger, right? What are the things and the tools that I might have, that protocols that are going to help facilitate that?
This last fall, we developed a school charter similar to the ruler, which is used with classrooms. But I started it with my staff on, how do you want to feel at work? And we came up with 3 words. And then, what does it look like when you feel this way? What do you hear? What do you see? Whatnot? And then, what do you do if you don't? And just had at the beginning of the year conversations of, what if you don't feel this way? And we just kind of talked about it and reviewed it. And really throughout the year, it really set the stage for us to be able to have some of those difficult conversations. We aligned our staff kudos or whatever to, I felt supported or valued or respected when this teacher did it. I tried to embed it throughout just, appreciation. But then also, if there was an issue, we really kind of talked about, are you venting to someone when you're sharing, and do you want action, or do you just want them to listen, or know that if you're venting and it comes out that there's a violation of our 3 agreements, then as a team, we need to do something. So if you're going to bring it to me as the building leader, action will be taken, and you can decide to vent to your peers, but together you need to determine your next steps. And if you're not willing to take action or to acknowledge the concern that you have with a peer, then don't say anything. But I think, we did a lot of the groundwork last fall, at the beginning of the year. And so now I'm at the point where, okay, I want to keep this going. I want to keep it fresh and continue to embed it in our day to day. So for this upcoming fall, just kind of reviewing some of those things. And the biggest problem is, what do you do if you don't?
Yeah.
And just perspective sharing, considering what you don't know, and that was kind of one of the articles that I didn't get to last year that I'm going to bring up this year, is starting conversations with perspective sharing of what I know now, what can you do to my picture or my understanding, which is my reality.
Wendy, thank you for that. I had to write down this notion of, what you call it, the ruler. Sounds really fascinating. I love the way you've simplified it into the 3 things.
Yeah, it comes from the Mark Brackett book, Permission to Feel. And I think it's tied to Stanford or
okay.
somewhere.
I'm going to have to look that up.
So there's
Thank
ruler schools, and schools have charters, classrooms have charters. Did it with my team.
Okay.
I wonder too, along that line, I was thinking, obviously addressing a concern in a meeting, maybe to an administrator, there's a power differential that can exist. And so I was thinking that as a leader, if that's the type of behavior that I want, is somebody bringing up a concern or a question in front of a group, I might have to demonstrate how that could look, and have somebody that I know and trust who maybe has talked to me about their concern bring it up at a meeting, so that we can show an example, and that I can sort of demonstrate how I would respond, because I think other people need to see that.
Yeah,
And
role
yeah,
playing.
like a kind of like a role play, but almost like a, I don't want to say a plant, but you
Mhm.
know, if somebody did come to me and say, hey, I don't really get this, or I don't really like this, like what's going on, it would be helpful to for me to be able to say, hey, I'm so glad you brought that up. Could you bring that up at the meeting so that because I'm sure other people have those same concerns. Can we wait and talk about it then? Because I need to show people that it's okay to ask these questions. And I think that is harder the bigger the group gets, right? Because there's relationships that I don't understand. There's dynamics that I don't get as, you know, one person in the group, that it just takes, I think those things take a lot of time to build, but I think they're really important. And I think you kind of have to be a little bit strategic about that, so you can model it yourself first, or even saying, I don't know if there's another way you can model that other than perhaps when maybe demonstrating some vulnerability of when you did something that you weren't proud of and talking to your staff about.
One of the things that worked well, one of my administrators that I had, and I liked when we had a concern, is they had a sheet in our teachers lounge and we'd sign up like agenda items. And so I don't think that happens all of the time. And some places now probably don't even have teachers all in the same building. Some of the teachers probably meet online, but we were all meeting in person still at that time. And so that gave an opportunity for people to write something down. And then there was a spot where you had to put your name behind it so that other teachers could see that it was on the agenda. And then it gave an in to begin the conversation.
Yeah, that's another great idea, Gretchen. Thank you for that. Yeah, very solid ways we can think about how to mitigate this. So thank you for sharing those great examples. I very much appreciate it. And any last questions or comments on this? Okay, we're going to go ahead and roll forward. One thing that out of the research is empathy douses shame. So the more you can lean in, keep the armor off, and show someone some empathy. We've got 5 ways to do that in the training. It's in the book. And I'll share some, I can share a resource after the training with you, or the webinar today with you. But again, if you can show empathy, that is going to douse shame in the classroom, out of the classroom, in the hallways, wherever that is. So little caveat there. There's also a great little short video clip. I want to honor your time and not show this, but I'll send you the link to this. It's a great little animated short about the difference between sympathy and empathy. And so great little one. It's narrated by Brene. It's very cute. You can even show it to kids. It's great. The other thing is I'll send you this list of key components of working with others that people can analyze. It's almost like an assessment list. Like, do I do this? Kind of, or is it something I need to strengthen? So I'll share this list with you as well after the webinar. But I do want to honor your time. It's about 12:02 my time, 1:02 yours. So I will send these to you as resources following, along with an activity that we do if we're doing the whole group Dare to Lead training. We'll come up with very specific ways and strategies to use to be more inclusive. What are some protocols, strategies, things that we could do? What are the ways we're practicing gratitude, modeling support, and supporting rest, play, and recovery, and those things. And so I'm really so honored that you are here, and educators in the field. So we do have the Daring Classrooms curriculum that can be brought in as well, that shows you the ways to bring daring leadership into the classroom in a lot of different ways. And if you're interested and you want to become Dare to Lead trained, please reach out to me. I do one-on-one, hybrid, small group, whatever kind of a structure that you think might work for you if you're interested. Yeah, that's the end. It's really great to have been with you today, and I've learned so much from you. So thank you very, very much.
And a special thanks to you, Jolene, for offering your time on this topic. I think it's really an important one, and I liked it. I have read several. I'm sure. I mean, how many of you have read some of Brene's books? Yeah, so it's always good to get a refresher because it's been a little while. So I appreciate that. And like Jolene said, she's available if you have a staff that might